So I got a hand that took place at MGM National Harbor a weekend before last.
Okay.
Playing 1-3 no limit, $500 cap. Maximum is seven-handed right now with the coronavirus restrictions. I'm on the button with about 1,200. The main villain is under the gun with approximately 1,000.
Okay.
The game has been very loose, passive. Players limping virtually 100% of hand
Nice.
and calling fairly large raises and then folding on later streets to pressure. So,
By the way, I have to.
I've been playing.
I need to interject here for a second to tell people too something interesting where a buddy of mine who's a CLP subscriber who had fed me the info about the fact that the bicycle was opening up, and he said that the games have been as good as they have ever been in the last 5 years. There are no pros. I don't know how this is in Washington, but in LA there are no pros, no Euros. It's just all hardcore degens. So it wouldn't surprise me.
I would agree for the most part. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say no pros, but I would say it's the softest I've seen games in 5 years for sure.
Really? Wow. Having to do with COVID just coming back type of thing?
Yeah. And I also think part of it may be a personal style thing, but I tended to do better in short-handed situations than I do at a 9 or 10-handed table. So I think the fact that it's capped at seven-handed play has been pretty beneficial.
Okay. All right, great.
So the under the gun is going to be the primary villain in this hand.
Okay.
He limps, middle position, one limps, then folds around to me. I have king four of clubs on the button. In a standard game, this would probably just be a fold. I elected to raise to 20, mainly because I have position and can be aggressive later on. But I actually feel like I figured to be ahead of some of the hands they're limping with. I mean, they've shown down queen deuce offsuit, 10-3 suited. I make it 20. The big blind calls, the under the gun limper calls, and MP1 limper calls. So the pot is at $80 going to the flop.
So big blind calls, two limper calls. So let me just say something here. So on the surface, a lot of people are going to be like, and I think this is just a newer school of thought too, where people will play a little bit more sound fundamentally pre-flop. They'll be like, oh my God, this is horrible. I'm telling you that I would play and win shit tons of money like this at Commerce playing over what you just described. You've got like 270% VPIP guys like opening that might even play a little bit passive fit or fold. You have a hand that's suited on the button, king four of clubs. I mean, we'd like it to be a little bit better, but I have certainly made this type of race before. What I would ask you is just something that I'm hyper aware of now is this a drop or a rake structure here in this game?
Yes, the max rake, it's 10% up to $6 max, and they take $1 out for the bad beat as well.
But it's a rake. It's not just a drop, right? But
Correct.
If you get two calls, you're going to get $6 taken out, right, of the hand.
Right.
When I've started to look at some data just when I was doing I've been doing a fair amount of gaming consulting for some other companies too, and just looking at how the rake affects basically different scenarios and in smaller games. It would, if I knew now what I know, I would probably play tighter in the Commerce 5-10 game when it was a $7 flat drop, which is just that it's hard to beat the drop / rake with a lot of sort of shitty hands. Now, if you think that this 20 will show an immediate profit anyways, where possibly both limpers are going to fold, or you're going to take it heads up and it's going to be sort of fit or fold, I can sort of get on board. What I would say is when I like to make sort of loose type of ISO raises, it tends to be with a little bit more playability. I don't really like the up and down there. I'd rather have like a 5-6 suited 7-6. Yeah, even obviously I'd rather have suited broadways. But I'd even rather probably have a suited connector here than king four suited. I mean, that's just something to be said. But okay, so four ways, pot's $80, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the flop is quite favorable. King of spades, jack of clubs, two of clubs. So I've got top pair and a king high flush draw.
Repeat the flop again.
King of spades, Jack of clubs, two of clubs.
Okay, so this is interesting because even before you tell me what to say, what you're going to say, sometimes in a spot like this, especially when you hold the clubs yourself, when you have like a weak top pair, I could sometimes find, if it got checked to you, I could sometimes find a check here as well. And normally what I'll see, usually like because you know, king four clubs is rarely, but for whatever reason, when you emailed this hand, it sort of reminded me of a couple hands where, like, say we raise with queen 10 suited, and the board comes out queen high, and we flop a flush draw, like queen deuce 6, and we're up against like 3 people. You know, we've got a sort of a weakish top pair, like the weakest top pair that someone's going to play, so we don't really outkick them with queen 10. And sometimes you'll check back the hands where you block the draw, especially on a disconnected board. Now, this board is not as disconnected, so I don't really actually mind betting. But if it was like king 4 deuce with 2 clubs or king 6 deuce with 2 clubs, I could definitely see checking back with king 4 clubs, because you block a king, you block the club draws, and you can sometimes put that weak sort of top pair in the check back range. With that being said, there's nothing wrong with building a pot up, but with the straight draws out there, and seems like how loose people are going to play, I'll probably just bet this too if it gets checked to me. What happened?
So it did check around to me.
Yep.
And I bet just over half pot. I bet $50.
I mean,
and I got called by the big blind and under the gun.
Now, if I were to bet, though, I would probably want to take a smaller sizing here, even at the low levels, because you don't want to. I mean, yes, maybe a jack will call, but I would tend to go 25-30. Like, you're trying to target the jacks. You're trying to target, again, you block the clubs. You don't want a situation where only a king calls you. And I'm not saying that you're going to get that, but you squeeze out somebody in the middle because it's multi-way, even if they don't even know what they're doing. You put a $50 bet in there into an $80 pot, and let's say the next to act guy, who would be the big blind. Like, if he has jack 9 suited, is he going to call 50 into 80 next to act?
Right, if he's caught in between, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I would tend to try to size down a little bit. But okay, you bet 50.
And I get called by the big blind and the under the gun, and MP1 folds.
So big blind calls, UTG calls. So you put in 150 on the flop. So now you're looking at about 230, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the one thing I'll say about the under the gun, just briefly, is that a few of his hands have gone to showdown, and the only way to characterize him is erratic. I mean, when I saw the hands and the actions he had taken previously, I was just left scratching my head. I mean, I had the sense he didn't know whether he was value betting or bluffing. He was just kind of throwing money out there, just clicking buttons.
The under the gun guy or the big blind?
The under the gun guy, who's going to become
the primary villain.
The primary villain. Yeah.
Okay.
So on the turn, it comes out the 4 of hearts, giving me 2 pair.
So you've got kings up and a king high flush draw.
Yeah, and there's no backdoor flush draw for anyone else.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So again, they both check to me, and at this point, I don't want to scare anyone out. So there's 230 in the pot, and I bet 100.
Okay.
So under half pot.
One of the things too that I would think to do, and I always talk about this as a live hack, live intangible thing, is I don't know. Did they have $100 chips on the table, or are you guys only using $5 chips at this table?
There were quite a few greens.
Quarter chips?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I like to spike the pot up with larger chip size denominations. So if for some reason I had a $100 chip here, I might go, now you're betting 100 into 230. Again, you've got a king. You would think that people are 3-betting with ace. I mean, sort of raising with ace king. So you would think that no one really has ace king. And at this point, probably, unless they're slow playing, they're not really going to have king jack. Now, sometimes people will limp call with king queen and king 10 off for sure. Mm-hmm. What I was going to say is I love to do this as a technique at the low stakes, which is when you're value betting, spike the pot up with larger size denomination chips. So let's say I was going to bet 90. I know you bet 100, but let's say I was going to bet 90 or 80 here. If I had a $100 chip, I would bet 80 or 90, announce the bet size, and put the large chip in. If you only have quarters, I would use 4 quarters, announce the bet size. And the reason why I do that, and I have found it to be very, very effective, is because it allows your opponent to actually see the size of the pot. Because if you just start using $5 chips, you've got a mound and a clump of chips, and people have no idea what the pot size is at the end, which is actually bad for you when you're value betting.
Right,
because
exactly.
when you try to get a river value bet in and they have no idea what the pot size is, they don't know that your bet size might only represent 60 or 70% of the pot when you bet, like, say, 270. But if they see 3 white chips in there, which was the 100 chips in LA, plus some red, they know at least the pot's 300. But if you've got a clump of nickels in there, they don't. So that's why I say, I would try to bet with your quarters here if you were going to bet 100.
And I did, and I tend to do that as a rule, but for a slightly different reason. I feel like the fewer chips that I'm grabbing with my hands, the less I'm giving away, rather than having to cut out chips. And, maybe it's something subtle, but especially more in 2-5 when people are paying more attention, the fewer physical chips that I have to grab and slide out into the pot, I feel like I'm giving less away in terms of any physical tell. So I always try to go for the larger chips for that reason as well.
Now, some people in the live chat are saying, well, I would size up here. And again, I think while that might be correct, like in theory, there's got to be something to be said about the blocking properties of the caller's hand, though. The fact that he has a king, that he has clubs, and that we're just going to make the assumption that no one has ace king here. So,
and even if they do, I've got them beat now on the turn with the 4 anyway.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, but you want the value. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that it's just, I don't know how many king X here is left is what I'm trying to say. But anyways, okay, so you bet 100 and what happens?
Big blind folds, and the under the gun, the erratic one, check raises to 250 at this point.
Wow, so under the gun, check raises to 250. Okay, so this is interesting here. Just a little bit of math. This is what I always like to do. Like, if you were to call, you've put in 500 on the turn, and then you had already put in, 50. It's like you've got 400 left, basically. Like, if you call the check raise, looks like you've got actually more than that. Like 700 left. Okay. Yeah. What I'll say about this that's interesting too, and just in terms of hand rating, is that this surprises me, not even knowing the guy's hand, because the big blind called in between on the flop. This would be much less of a surprise if you bet the flop, it got folded to this under the gun guy, he just called, and now he's check raising turn heads up. But here he's overcalled the flop. And the reason why, because I think that hands would tend to be slow played off a little bit, not fast played off a little bit more with the caller in between on the flop. I'm not saying that it's not possible that the guy couldn't have a big hand. Now, really what he's representing here is like deuce or king jack here. I don't think you can really go ape shit here because there's no reason to. I think your hand is once again kind of in between. I mean, you've got king 4 here, right? So I think it's just a clear call.
Zero consideration of folding.
No, not fold, but don't 3-bet the turn.
Right, and I was also never considering jamming just because I'm only getting called by hands that have me beat. But I didn't know, in hindsight, we'll wait to the river maybe to discuss the turn. But what did run through my head at that point was to kind of click it back and take him from 250 up to somewhere between 400 and 500.
Yeah, but what do you think that he has, though? What is he representing? With a click back sort of, or with it just kind of like a little dinky check raise here on turn.
Essentially, top 2 or a set would be what he's representing.
Yeah, so I mean, by the way, people are saying it's not a cap bet; it's 500 buy-in. Sorry, I wrote that right. It's just a 500 buy-in cap. It's not Arizona. It's true no limit. So when you're because again, like it's like you start to go through the hands, like, so what you'll see sometimes here, but usually you won't see it weighted to the turn. I would find it odd that this guy would wait to the turn to do this. And because you raise pre-flop, occasionally, if you were just heads up against under the gun, he might be trying to like play some big overpair tricky, or like ace king, and he thinks he's got the nuts here. But I think that when it goes limp and you raise on the button, he's going to throw the limp re-raise in, right? That's the whole point. Right. So it's hard pressed for me to really see a hand that he's representing here that's worse than yours that would check raise. I mean, I'm not saying of course you've got clubs here too, so I'm never folding. What would be interesting is if you call and the river's like a brick, like an offsuit 8, and then he checks. I think you would have to go for value. I mean, for him to like check raise king jack and then check a blank at the end is really, really weak. I mean, I've seen it before, but so for example, if you call here on turn and say the river's a brick and he checks, I'm assuming you're going to value bet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's king of spades, jack of clubs, deuce of clubs, turns the 4 of hearts, hero raised over a few people with king 4 of clubs, bet the flop, got 2 calls on king jack deuce, he turns kings up, check, hero 100, big blind folds, under the gun, kind of clicks up a min raise to 250, hero calls. Okay, what's the river? By the way, it looks like the pot is like 730 now.
Yeah, that's what I've got,
Yeah.
730. Mm-hmm. River is an offsuit ace.
Offsuit ace?
Ace, yeah. So, it wasn't the best card in the deck, but like you said, I wasn't worried about ace king the way that the hand was played pre-flop. I really didn't see ace jack being in his range check raising the turn. I was really worried about either the flop set of deuces or perhaps if he had the queen 10 of clubs and making a straight on the river. So I was really concerned more about those two hands rather than aces up.
By the way, I will say again, just from live experience and just live patterns, I don't know if I've ever seen, thinking back, doing my commentary, thinking about hands, and somebody take a combo draw multi-way and wait until the turn to check raise it. I feel like queen 10 of clubs, like one of those mega draws, is just going to be raised off on the flop if raised when it goes bet call. So I tend to really, really discount that. This is really kind of interesting here, depending on what he does. Because if he's not scared of like ace king here and say he rips it, or bets really huge, what does he do here on this offsuit ace?
He bet 325.
You had 700 left in your stack, right? At the start.
Yeah, I had him covered by a little bit, so I had slightly more than that. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I mean, 700. So he bet 325. Because I was going to say, if he starts to bet like 400 or 500 here, I think I fold.
Yeah.
He bets 325. UTG. So after he clicked it up to 250, he bets 325. By the way, I see my buddy Pete O'Neill in the live chat who used to do the graphics and our free video Stay in School. I wonder if he's still there. I wonder what he would do in this hand. So what were you thinking there, caller? 325.
So, I block any I thought he could have had an ace high flush draw. I block any ace high flush draw that would have made 2 pairs, so he can't have that. I'm not really worried about aces up. I think in a tougher 2-5 game, I could have found a fold here. Seeing some of the hands that he had tabled and how erratic he was.
I mean, if he's erratic, here's the thing. If he's erratic, right? If you ever see any hint of erraticness here, just like with weird button clicking, I have to call, especially to this sizing, right?
Right. That was my decision, was the math, and that fact was what made me end up making the call. Yeah,
because, I mean, I was going to say, like, but if he's like a straightforward player and you haven't seen like a lot of erratic play from him, I just don't know. I don't know really what you beat here. It just kind of screams of deuce. So you called. I actually don't know the result, but so when we're thinking about erratic play, what we're going to think about here, like, is it possible that he has a hand like the nut flush draw? I mean, I just talked about how could he turned like ace 3 or ace 5 of clubs, or did something weird with like ace 10 or some shit like that, ace 10 with the ace of clubs, or or could he have had like jack 4 suited that you beat? You know what I mean? Deuce 4 for like lower 2 pair.
Right.
Hero calls. All right, what's the result?
So he flipped over ace queen offsuit.
Ace queen offsuit.
Yeah. So he limped under the gun.
That is button clicking.
Called the raise. Yeah, exactly.
That is button clicking for sure. But you know what I'm saying though. It's a really bad river card for you though.
Yeah,
too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then just one last thing too, because I know people what I was saying is that your raise here to juice the pot up. Here's the difference between a flat drop and a rake. And I can really get on board with this. And I used to make this mistake and it was god awful now when I think about it, especially at 5-5 in LA, like at the bike structure. With a flat drop where they're taking X amount, no matter what the flop is, you don't want to over limp these hands. Like if you were going to play it, you would raise or fold for sure. Looking at the math, in a rake, it's a little bit better. You've achieved the cap by raising here. I don't think it's, I almost think it's too weak to not play the hand against like these guys with King 4 suited. But you probably, with the structure of a large amount of money taken out of the pot, you actually want to raise to make the pot larger, so that sort of the commission percentage of the pot is not as high. But I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. If you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this call-in hand, hit the like button down below. To check out crushlivepoker.com, click on the link in the description. Use the code YTA300 to get the first 30 days for free.